Did you see the little intro video just then?
Yeah. What was that? I didn't
Yeah.
see it.
Some one of the many like little pieces of media we created while we were still doing the studio, or while while Mogul Minds was still a brick and mortar location. Um, so uh, for anybody watching, good afternoon. Right now, you have Isaiah. For those of you who are familiar with the former Mogul Minds Network, I was the founder of Mogul Minds. Today, we are with Councilman Dacres, who I'm going to bring in here for some input here shortly. Um, and we're going to be addressing this just disastrous ICE situation. I think it really doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum, I guess, if you will, you're on. This situation, just in my opinion, has not been implemented well at any level. And I think there's a multitude of reasons for that. I think we'll get into that. But I'd just been thinking about it, and I didn't want to operate out of kind of emotion. And I started to post multiple statuses and hop in on different people's statuses, and I just stopped myself from doing that because I want to have more information, and I like to talk from an informed position. And just as I'm looking at things as a whole, I'll go ahead and share my screen with you briefly here, Councilman Dacres, and I'm going to just for viewership purposes and kind of see where I was coming from. This is the Mogul Minds Facebook page, and I put something on Facebook, and I'm going to read that back, and I want you to tell me if you think that this is a fair stance, or where you think my perspective could use a little bit more insight. Maybe there's some areas that you could come in and help. So what I said was, I truly think this ICE situation in Chicago is insane. I remember the administration saying they were to be targeting the criminals and taxpayer burdens. In parentheses, we got enough of that. We don't need to import more. I agree with that. If they're just locking up gangbangers, rapists, and predators, then I'm here for it. But going after landscapers and the elote man and the tamale lady is crazy to me. I very much dislike the way it's being racialized in the media also, as if all immigrants came from Latin America. I'm going to continue to read through the actual status, and then we can kind of address it piece by piece, or however you choose. Seems like their
That's
effort.
my
Yeah, go
fault.
ahead.
Yeah, I'll just do a brief introduction first. I'm Darrel Dacres. I'm the councilman for the 20th district uh, on the north side of Chicago. I also, I wear many hats. I also am the violence prevention program manager uptown in Rogers Park over at One North Side and the CP4P Coalition. A lot of collaboration, a lot of hard work being done across the city by different groups. And today I'm speaking from a personal perspective. This isn't like some agenda because a lot of people say it's a lot of like paid this and that. I'm not like an alderman. I'm a councilman. I joined my position for accountability. If you look up, this is the first seat for a councilman to be able to hold people accountable in Chicago because we never even had a body like that. So in some ways we're advanced, but in other ways we're so far behind other big cities. And I think that that's important to mention when we're talking about solutions to these problems. So just for clarification, those are some of the hats I wear and the different orgs that I'm associated with, but I'm just speaking today as Darrel Dacres. I'm speaking from my own personal experience as well as lived experience through work and or otherwise.
Right. So you're not here in any official capacity, but your official capacity does give you different insight. And I think that that's why you're a good person to begin this conversation with. I don't think that any one conversation is going to be the end to anything, but I do think that we can begin to change the way that people on both sides of the spectrum think about what's going on and how we can move forward and get progress. But let me go ahead and finish reading this status, and then we'll come back reading this post, and then we'll come back here and we'll talk about it. And for anyone
Well, that's the
watching,
thing.
Yes, sir.
My fault. One more thing. Did you want to address them? Because we could address them like comment by comment, or you could read it all, and then we can kind of go back to it. But I did, I don't want to like be trying to remember what I'm thinking as I'm hearing it. You
I'll,
know?
I'll read it all, and then we can kind of go through, it's 4 or 5 paragraphs. We'll go through
Yeah.
paragraph by paragraph. Yeah. So second paragraph here, seems like their efforts could be better focused elsewhere, in my opinion. But that's also hard to do when the local government won't even make a deal just to give them access to the county jails. When I'm saying them, I'm talking about ICE, the federal government, the Trump administration. That's also who I was talking about earlier when I said the administration. And when I say local government, I'm talking everything from, Mayor Johnson up to Governor Pritzker. And then I ask the question or make the statement, I wonder if ICE would be going so hard if the local government would work with them on just that piece of giving them the ability to interact with the jails, right? To once somebody gets locked up, notify the federal authorities, get them up out of here. And we can come back to that. I'm sure you do have comments on that. So it does beg the question, right? Would ICE be going so hard if local governments would work with them just on that piece, while they can work on a path to citizenship for the verified asylum seekers? There's a 0% chance of ever getting all illegal migrants out of the U.S. But at the same time, a nation that can't protect its borders or enforce its laws is no nation. So at this point, both sides need to deal with reality, compromise, and make a deal. Everyone can't stay, but they can't remove everyone either. All right, I'm going to continue on here. To anyone who feels all illegal immigrants, in quotations, should be left alone, I challenge you to find the country that these immigrants are fleeing that would allow hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens to move there in mass and get government benefits. And in the unlikely scenario you do find this country, which I don't believe exists, then find the local population that would fight for the American foreigners to be able to do that. Because even if the government's on your side, that doesn't mean the population is. Also, I think it's really easy to only blame Trump's administration. And all that does is take accountability away from the local politicians, Johnson, Pritzker, who made this part of their political strategy at the expense of the Chicago taxpayers. They literally took resources from needy Chicago taxpayers of all ethnic backgrounds in an act of political defiance to Trump/Republican states. If you guys, and what I'm referencing here is, if you guys remember Governor Abbott out of Texas, I think they were calling him Professor X because the guy's in a wheelchair. I remember him saying, we do not have the financial resources to house all these people coming through illegally. And I remember Chicago, and I think at that time it was Mayor Lori Lightfoot saying, send them here, we'll take them. All right, so this is what I'm referencing. And I believe that was in defiance to Trump and Republican states. And they always knew that this would be the outcome, because there's only so many outcomes you can get out of this. But we're going to dive deeper on that. It was never sustainable. They just virtue signaled while kicking the can down the road. Wrapping it up here, in my opinion, all Johnson, Pritzker are doing is using migrants as political pawns. They're stoking fear and antagonizing the administration into further action while they offer zero solutions. But when elections for governor and mayor come around the next 2 years, because I think the gubernatorial election is next year, and then the mayoral election is 2027. All they have to do is point at Trump and say, vote for me if you want to fight him, and people will fall for it. Again, being emotionally manipulated by deviant politicians who don't care about any of us, migrants or citizens. And then I added at the very bottom, because as I'm sure many of you guys have seen, There has been a lot of people, stories of people ramming ICE agents, and I don't know to what degree is being sensationalized on the parts of the citizens. I don't know to what degree is being sensationalized on the parts of the media and the parts of the ICE agents who are experiencing whatever pushback they're experiencing. But what I said was, I understand the urge to resist what you view as injustice, but I truly think it is ill-advised to do anything to federal agents that could end up with you catching federal charges. Fed time has to be served at 85%, and nobody is catching a plane to come see you. So think about that and what it accomplishes before you catch that case. Now, that's the totality of it. What stood out to you there? What, if any, questions, comments, concerns did you have? Is there anything that you want to address?
The whole post. First, I want
Okay.
to say that I appreciate like you kind of holding both sides accountable. A lot of people, what they're doing right now, which is unhealthy for the country as a whole, is everything's on the right, everything's on the left. If the country's on fire, it got lit from both sides. If you ask me, you see what I'm saying, and that's over years and years of historical doctrine that, I'm not going to go so deep into that right now because of the topic. But the problem with like not going so deep into it is people tend to say, well, you should get over this issue and get over that issue, when historically, uh when you're talking about immigration and poverty, the government didn't have a problem opening up the books for Ellis Island when white Europeans came here, poor nonetheless, but that was considered legal. Some of them came here, they were criminals, murderers, basically vagrants from lower Europe, lower class Europe. Came here and they got the free ride. They got taxpayer dollars. They got the benefits to be able to build institutions that later became, uh, you know, racist. They became like, unionized, and they kept out marginalized communities that probably were here hundreds of years before them.
To,
And
to, to that
it's
point,
just sad that, when you put the mirror up.
not to cut
Oh,
you
go
off,
ahead.
to that point, for anybody who's unfamiliar with what you're talking about, the way that we kind of learn history is through a very Eurocentric lens. If you actually go back, everybody likes to talk about Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, but very rarely have people listen to the entire thing. What you were just speaking about with uh, the European underclass, if you will, or impoverished Europeans coming here in mass, that is actually something that Martin Luther King talks about in the "I Have a Dream" speech. How they gave them an economic base by taking it away from those very people who you were just talking about, who'd been here for hundreds of years already. But go ahead. I'm just adding a little bit of context to what you're saying.
The it's a few things that, that has implications within on itself. uh those people have to this day somewhat been subsidized. There's farmers right now that's been subsidized by Jack Daniels and the government, and a lot of those subsidies are running out, and people are messed up. So I don't want to say that the government needs to 100% just give away all its resources to migrants, because as you can see, 60 years down the road, 80 years down the road, that's not going to work out. But those people are still able to say, hey, help white America, because they're struggling and the government needs to come in and help. But they're just offsprings of immigrants who came in as well. So it's like, when you talk about like sustaining this type of system, at first you have to recognize that that is the system of America, and it shouldn't only be opened up for white America. It shouldn't be only opened up for Croatians and Yugoslavians, like people from Russia and Europe, to come over here, no problem, off the plane, off the boat, and get taxpayer dollars for support for wars or whatever's happening in their country. And people that's in neighboring American countries are somehow looked at as unworthy of those kind of benefits and unworthy of those kind of tools and resources to, like as they say so much, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But the thing is, you talk about and I'm trying to stay in order to how you said it on the post. When you talk about the path to freedom and doing it the right way, to a lot of these people, coming to Chicago was that path. You know, when you put them on the bus and sent them here as Republican city states, uh, you basically said, you know, we're not going to deal with this problem because they didn't have solutions. Busing them wasn't a solution. That was getting rid of the problem in there. So you talk about votes for them to get their votes up. And when they came here, there was a struggle, which I also don't agree with how like politics go up and down. So things aren't always perfect. But if you're gonna bus, you know, hundreds and thousands of people to a city, then that's an economic crisis. We're gonna need some support for these people if we're a sanctuary city. Now, people talk about Johnson and even Lightfoot saying that we're a sanctuary city. Chicago's been a sanctuary city for over 200 years. In the 1800s, Native Americans and Black people all over America came to Chicago to look for a better life, and they were accepted by the people here, the tribes here, the government here. So this isn't something new. This isn't something. And if you look at Chicago, Chicago's a very beautiful city. And there's you know, as far as like poverty. There's a lot of poverty in Chicago, but we're decked against. There's a lot of rich people here, so the 1% is a little bit bigger in Chicago than it is in the rest of average everyday America. So the poverty is going to be just as big because the population is just as big. Which, like I say, you know, that goes into the numbers and what people think of crime. Because let's send the National Guard, let's send ICE, let's send them to Black communities, you know, let's send them to impoverished brown communities. Those are not solutions. You see, I work in violence prevention, and what I know is over policing any issue has never been a solution. That's why we keep putting money to, you know, people talk about defunding the police, but we don't talk about the money that's automatically generated and raised every year annually for different police districts all across America. And crime continuously rises. Like, we talk about like the crime being a problem, but if paying cops was the solution, then crime wouldn't exist. So we need to
So
stop trying to over police every little institutional issue and figure out what the solutions are.
okay, and before we go down too many different areas, like you say, let's keep it in the order of what was brought up, right? So I think you addressed a lot of what I brought up in these first two kind of sections of my post. So this current administration, right, Trump's administration, ultimately they did, and
You're breaking up a little bit, brother.
am I still breaking up? I think it might have just been because somebody was joining backstage. Am I still breaking up, or can you hear me? I'm not sure why you wouldn't be able to hear me right now. You should. Well, there's a few people watching. If you guys can hear us, go ahead and type in the chat. If you guys can hear me without any issue, please type in the chat. Let me know. That would be very helpful if you guys could. I don't want to just leave dead air if you guys aren't able to hear me for whatever reason, but I'm not seeing any issues on my end. And then Key, I see you backstage. Okay, so I think that might have been an issue on. Okay, Ronnie, I appreciate you, sir. Councilman Dacres, I do believe that that's on your end. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of time to jump back in once you bounce back. But essentially, Councilman Dacres was breaking down a few different things, and he's obviously going to have some insight that I won't necessarily have. Just in, like he said, he's run down, quite a bit of what he does, and he does work in violence prevention. He works with these different nonprofit organizations, and then again as a councilman. I think that there's too much polarization. It's everybody's either all the way on the right or all the way on the left, and it's just kind of absurd to me in general, because as far as I'm concerned, it's two wings of the same bird. I think Councilman Dacres is having some tech issues. Let me bring somebody up from backstage in the meantime. Kiwan, if you're ready for me to bring you up, if you could go on cam, that would be ideal. Okay, Councilman Dacres is back. All right, so Councilman Dacres, you able to hear me? Kiwan, I am going to bring you up when I get a chance here. We're going to do that mostly toward the end. There's a few topics we wanted to go through with Councilman Dacres first. Now, Councilman Dacres, what I said was just give you a little recap. They said that they were going to be focusing, targeting criminals, taxpayer burdens, the gangbangers, which we happen to know for a fact. Look, a ton of the people who came here, I'm not even going to address the came here illegally. And the reason that I'm not going to address or focus on it, I will address it, but not focus on it, is because, in my opinion, those people were swindled and bamboozled by politicians and big business looking for cheap labor and politicians looking to embolden their voter base. That is my opinion. Could be different. Other people could see it different ways, but that is how I view it. So if you're in destitute poverty in some so-called third world country, and you hear America, which is just a couple of countries away, is just letting everybody in right now, multiple people have made it in. I mean, why not? If there's no opportunity where you are and they're letting everybody in right now, why not? I get that. But what you also, some people are looking for a better life. All they want to do is come here and make an honest living for their family. I completely get that. I am sympathetic to that. One of my parents came here from another country, so I absolutely get looking after the American dream. But then also, just like in Chicago, we have gangbangers in every neighborhood across this city, and everybody's in all of the surrounding cities, states, and towns. There are people who are on the run from Chicago. Things that they're either on the run from their opposition, their ops as they call them, or they're on the run from law enforcement because of things they've done in the streets here. Those same people exist in these other countries, and some of those people fled and came here. Because we didn't vet any of these people, those people are also mixed within the crowds of honest, hardworking, asylum-seeking migrants. We did absolutely no vetting, and those people are just here. If the local government is not willing to, because eventually some of these people are just going to get caught doing their crimes, doing what they regularly do, doing what they were doing back home, the same reason they fled back home. Some of them came here and picked up some of the same bad habits. So I even heard some of them were actually beefing with some of the local Chicago Hispanic gangs, some of the actual migrant gangs. I don't know if you can speak to that further. Maybe you can. But my question is, if the local government, because we are a sanctuary state, will not work with them at the very least on giving them the people who they lock up and they get to the precinct or they send them to county, who are they supposed to target? Who is the administration and ICE supposed to go after if they're getting zero support from the state? Help me better understand how it's supposed to work.
So let me break down like American politics a little bit better as far as immigration, because we know how disenfranchisement works as far as like regular like black issues, right? Like, oh, he's black, he did it, right? So we know that from history. When it comes to immigration issues or migrant, this whole you know, the biggest difference between a lot of migrant situations and everybody that came here 50 years ago or whatever, like I say, most people come here for a better life. With this Venezuelan situation and the it was basically about asylum. They were saying that that was the wave that they were, they jumped on, where they kind of looked at it like a backdoor through America. And through our asylum laws, the vetting is minimal. So the loophole wasn't local. It wasn't a local issue. This was a federal issue. And some of the bigger problems is you got people that filed for their papers in the 80s and they're still on some waiting list.
I just
You
became
got
privy
percent
to
ice
that. I
out
didn't
here.
know
They're
that.
picking up people who's been, yeah, you got people who've been waiting and going every 3 months, every 6 months to some facility downtown, taking their fingerprints, getting their DNA, everything. And those people who haven't committed any crime are being picked up. Why? Because they registered to the government, and most people, it's incentive enough. Like you say, the low test lady, the corn man, these people are the criminals when they start talking on TV. Like, we want the big criminals. Yeah, they want the Elotas, but they want anybody who's trying to make it without them. And if you register, if you come here, if you're a dreamer, if you come here with the paper, DACA, and this and that, they still send you back. So it's really a matter of like a different kind of racism. It's not just like regular black racism that we deal with here in America on the regular. It's a little bit different, but very similar. You see what I'm saying? And a human rights should be respected no matter what race, no matter what religion, no matter what language a person speaks. It doesn't matter. And as far as Illinois and Chicago, ICE didn't just start coming here when the National Guard came. ICE will pick you up any day of the week. They didn't need permission from Trump to come here. And if you're locked up and you're an immigrant, they deport you just as fast. What people are getting right now is what was subliminally told you would get by the right. But a lot of people don't realize like what was happening here in
I don't know that it was
Chicago, where
subliminal, in all
people say like,
fairness.
oh, you're just letting people out.
I think they were more
If
outright with it.
you're arrested, well, it's like if there's this subsidiary news station, like I think it's called Ground News, where like they give you
Mhm.
information from the left, they give you
Yeah.
information from the right, they tell you who's in the middle. And I like to
Yeah,
look up kind of like
it's
where
similar
stories
to
are to
Straight
kind of
Arrow
like
News.
yeah, like so I could basically have something to, ground my information and not pick a side off emotions or whatever. But pretty much what was happening here in Chicago was if you were a migrant and you were arrested for like, let's say vagrancy because you don't have anywhere to live, right? Or you got locked up
Criminalizing
drunk and
homelessness.
disorderly, right? Because you don't have nowhere to live. Yeah. They were releasing them like they would release American citizens. They weren't sending them to ICE saying, "Here, we got a migrant and he's drunk." You see what I'm saying? If you had broke some criminal law and you had a warrant for ICE, Illinois was not releasing you back to the public. So it's kind of like they were saying that's what was happening. But I know people that, they were locked up for traffic tickets back in the day. ICE was picking them up long before this big media show that's happening right now. So when you talk about like the casualties, that's who they were telling people they were coming for. We're coming for grandma. We're coming for whoever missed that dotted line on the paperwork. Oh, you've been coming to the building signing up. Oh, we ain't gave you your papers all the way yet for the last 20 years. You're out of here. It's really sick for people to be talking about the right way and do things the right way. Slavery was at one point in time a legal aspect of the law. And to do the right thing would mean stay on the plantation, keep picking the cotton. I had somebody tell me if, like this guy was standing in front of an ICE agent. In my mind, if he's an American citizen, he has his right to protest, right? Not
Right.
saying that other people don't have rights or whatever. I just don't want to get too deep into that. But if they arrest him, if whatever happens, he has his right to do that as an American citizen, as a Chicagoan. Maybe his grandma, maybe his cousin, maybe somebody in his family was just deported. Maybe his primary care for the person. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But to say he shouldn't protest because in the video, I didn't see the video, but in that video there was people from the community that they all got involved. People got riled up and they're like, man, we don't have the tools to fight and we don't need to be getting involved in the military. Hey, listen, brother, the fight in this aspect was at the voting booth. The America voted the other way, so this is what we're gonna get. Like, it's not so much that like because we got that we have no tools. Some of the tools we got
So
is protesting, and
so
because
let
some
so
people
let
don't got
let me
big
pause you
fancy
there.
lawyers and this and that.
Let me pause you there because you bring up a good point and I want to address that. Like you said, ultimately the American people voted for America first. Now, is that what the American people have gotten? I don't know. I don't know that that's the case. From my perspective, I think that, look, that's a
Well,
whole
the
different
American
conversation.
dollar.
That,
Listen to
that that's
this.
a whole
Hold on, I
different.
don't want to cut your
Yeah.
wisdom.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Just for the sake of the topic, the American dollar since January 1st has dropped 11% down. So that's the biggest surge down in 50 years. So minus the recession, the housing crisis, all of that didn't kill the dollar as much as 11 months as President Donald Trump has given us.
So I would
Biden,
I
the
would
migrants, the money, none of that.
I would need more data because I would need more data on that because I'm willing to bet a large chunk of that has a lot to do with America's foreign policy and funding genocide and things like this. But I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole because that's a different conversation for us to get into a different time. And I'm sure that we both have strong opinions about how a lot of that is happening. So I want to completely separate that issue, and maybe this does need these types of chats needs to be something that we do on a more regular basis, maybe once a month. Like I said, I have people backstage. Appreciate you, Key. I do see you. We are going to get you in here, and we're not going to make this too long. We're about at the halfway mark about right now, and I still feel like there's a bit for us to get into, and then we will, take some callers, anybody else who jumps in. Maybe it's just Key. It depends on how that works. Now, America voted for America First, right? And America voted against spending taxpayer dollars on making immigrant lives more comfortable. Ultimately, that is what a lot of Americans voted for. Doesn't matter how anybody feels about it. This is the administration that won. And from my perspective, maybe it's because I don't know that much. Maybe it's because I'm being socially engineered by the media and social media, or maybe it's because elements of it are just true. It seems like to me and to a lot of people, especially people showing up at the town hall meetings that I see on YouTube. It seems like things, as always, are promised to lower economic communities. Things, as always, are, people run on, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then the taxpayers watch, conversations about property taxes going up. They watch migrants come in and get 6 months free shelter, thousands of dollars a month in EBT or food stamps. They watch all of these hundreds of millions of dollars be spent on migrants. And then it would be different if, for example, the local government was creating Chicago jobs for Chicagoans to take care of these people. At the very least, you're putting money back into the Chicago economy when you're spending all this money. But from what I've seen, they hired a bunch of out-of-state companies and contractors to do a lot of this work with housing the migrants and working these facilities. It, to me, seems like the local government is spending Chicago taxpayer dollars on taking care of what I believe is their new voter base. To me, it seems like, okay, we're losing certain percentages of our native-born Chicago voter base. Some of that with the Black community, some of that with the Hispanic community, and then it's just spread about, right? How can we embolden our base and keep this stranglehold that the Democrats have on this city? And I'm not saying Democrats or Republicans are good or bad. I think that politics is dog shit in general, and I think that to play at the highest levels, you have to get in bed with the people who have the money, and these people have their agendas, and you will be at their will. I think it's two wings on the same bird, though, ultimately. I don't look at one as good and one as bad. I think that it's two wings, but it's the same bird. So we get manipulated into, oh, this is all Trump, and then Trump or the right is like, look at these goddamn liberal leftist policies. And ultimately, it doesn't seem like anybody's doing what's best for us, the American citizen, the American taxpayer. I feel like we're kind of taking an L here. Where in this whole thing are the Chicago citizens being taken care of? And because the conversation about accountability did come up, and you being a councilman, I do have to say, look, we shit the bed when it came to the voting booth. Us as Chicago citizens, taxpayers, and voters, I think I read that there was something like a 30% turnout for the mayoral election last time. And honestly, I didn't really know much about what was going on. I wasn't really following it that closely because I've become disillusioned with politics over the last couple of years. But ultimately, many of us just don't care to inform ourselves enough. So I do want to say that any of us with any complaints about local government, because I think that's where we can make the most change, we do have to acknowledge the fact that if we didn't get out there and vote, we have to do the due diligence now to learn what needs to be done to fix these things. In your opinion, about what I said about the Chicago taxpayers not being looked after, do you think that that's completely unfair for me to have that perspective?
Well, anybody knows the history of Chicago knows that we are not called the Windy City because of the weather, as bad as it can get in the wintertime. But that's not my point of saying that is I agree with the two wings of a bird. If we had representation back in the 70s when, like you're talking about right after integration, all that, we wouldn't have had a need to create something like the Black Panther Party. And if people took that serious, it wouldn't have got infiltrated and shut down by the government. You see what I'm saying? So we have never had black representation in America as like black people. But what we do is with Republicans, with Democrats, whoever has the power at that time, we hope and pray that they put in a law so good for Americans that even us at the bottom, being black people, you know what I mean? To them, a lot of us are cultured, indigenous, whether we're from the Caribbean, from American, Native, like however we are. But they look at us as black people. So we hope and pray that they come up with a law that's just good enough for all Americans that black people can get in there. And when the law sounds just too good, they scream it's DEI, it's a problem, it's this, it's that. And then they take away the resources, so they complain about it, but we never even get the resources that's promised to us. So
I
going
do
back
have a
to my
question.
Ellis Island,
I do have a question to that statement.
oh, go ahead.
Based on historical context, though, you can understand how. Look, you even brought up how there was initiatives like the Black Panthers that were infiltrated. And for those of you guys who don't know, Darrel is referencing something that you can actually Google and Wikipedia, which is called COINTELPRO. This is the government counterintelligence program. Some people who would be called freedom fighters today, they literally infiltrated these organizations with the exact intentions to disrupt and disband the people who were looking for resources. But go ahead, Darrel, with what you were saying about the resources that Chicagoans are not getting while the migrants, in our view, us people on the ground who are not privy to all this political jargon, it looks like our taxpayers are going to everybody else other than us. Our kids need things that they are not receiving. Our schools need things that they're not receiving. But at the same time, we're hearing things like Brandon Johnson's administration spent a couple $100 million on dealing with the migrant situation. I don't know okay. I'm gonna add one in. I don't know. Can you hear me here, Councilman Dacres?
I can hear you. I don't know if it's my signal or I'm getting a lot of feedback.
I'm gonna assume that it's your signal. You were in twice. I took you out once. So hopefully that should help. But if you're still getting feedback, I can get rid of the one of you that's backstage because it's probably because you're in twice. So just let me know if you want me to do that. But ultimately, even the comments are saying, like we got Chastity up here saying they want to hear about what your thoughts are on this the allocation of resources and how the Chicago taxpayer dollars are being spent. It seems like that's what people have these questions.
So there's a lot of issues in terms of like understanding local government before you even get to the mayor or before you get to the governor. There's a lot of like, for instance, before there was a crisis, right? There was this big, after the housing crisis, I'm saying before there was a migrant issue crisis, there was a housing crisis. And right after that, the city put this money together for first home owners, and they, like I said, the way we ask for help is the way we get it. They offer this like, if you got a 650 credit score, you can get this, you can get that. It's really for poor Black people. Like if you're rich and you're, of another race, you don't need these resources. So they put stuff together that's basically, if you're a Black, or if you're in a, impoverished community, this is kind of for you. And it's not always taught how to apply to get those resources. So there was, I believe it was like $1 million or something like that. Like that didn't even get claimed. It was people in the middle of the housing crisis for the whole country that didn't claim the money. And Rahm Emanuel, as the mayor, before they just disintegrated the money, decided that he would use that money.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with your connection, but he was saying Rahm, and I do know that some of these programs that Councilman Dacres was talking about was true, because I personally used a program like this to purchase my first property a couple of years ago, where if you are a first-time homeowner, instead of putting down the 20% that you regularly would have to put down, instead of having to put down that full 20%, you only might need to put down 5% or 7%, or could be less than that. And depending on where the market is, your interest rates might not be that high. So I do know that that's not something that a bunch of people told me about, or anything. I had to do a bunch of research to find out this information. So I know that Councilman Dacres is not just blowing smoke, even though he is having connectivity issues right now. So I'm hoping that he's going to be joining back soon. We have not been live from the Mogul Minds page in probably 3 or 4 years. I'm really glad for any of you guys that have joined. I appreciate everybody who comments. Do us a favor, if you're watching at all, even if it's just for 30 seconds, go ahead and comment. It helps out with the algorithm, whatever platform you're watching on, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, wherever it is. Drop any type of comment, anything that you guys would like us to talk about. If you guys want us to do more of these, there's different people within the city who work for different organizations that I can definitely bring in and have these types of conversations with. Key, I'm not sure what's going on with Councilman Dacres, but you are backstage right now, so if you are ready to hop in, Key, let me know by going, turning cam on, and I can kind of bring you in, and we can, when Councilman Dacres hops back in, we can kind of address these issues together as a whole. So when Councilman Dacres does hop back in, it looks like he's hopping back in right now. So Key, do me a favor, I'm gonna leave you up, but go ahead and stay. I wish that I knew how to. Oh yeah, let me see. All right, so Councilman Dacres, you were saying a few things about the different programs and how the resources are allocated, and I did bring Key up here. We're gonna bring him in a little bit, but you were talking about the allocation of resources and how these are specifically for the underserved communities. You brought up First Time Homeowners Association, and when you were having the connectivity issues, I was actually telling the viewership that I know that you're not just blowing smoke. I know that these programs do exist because I am a property owner because of one of these programs. I did use an FHA loan. So I do know for a fact how incredibly helpful that was. But again, one of the things that we talked about, yesterday was messaging is a large part of the issue with our local politicians. So, like, you explained to me so many different initiatives that have been put forward, but I don't know anything about them. So if they're not actually getting the message across to us, I don't actually know how effective it would be. I had to do a lot of research on my own, on the internet, and through the different networking I've done through Mogul Minds Network and the different business people I've met to actually find out about FHA loans. But go ahead and tell us about that allocation of resources that you were talking about, please.
So two things just on that, where I was leaving off is, so what he did in that instance was use that money for immigration issues long before people knew there was one, because people were waiting on their paperwork. People were kind of getting mistreated by CPD and actually saying, hey, you know what, if I'm gonna get deported, I don't even care. And they were making complaints. So he put the money that people didn't use, that was allocated for, like, lower income communities, for migrants. That is, like I could say, my first example of seeing it before it became like popular conversation, before it became a crisis, before it became something that we're dealing with right now. I've seen this already. And the position I'm in now, when I ran for office, the position didn't exist. We fought for this position because we needed accountability. I personally seen cops put drugs on people. I was a victim of police brutality. I had personally seen, them degrade people and use racial slurs. So we wanted to fix those problems in Chicago as a whole. And my community was a part of the coalition that fought to have district councils, to fought to have, oversight for these police who, if this police shoots somebody, he's reporting to his partner and probably, loading his own evidence. Like, it's all through them. So through that, we fought to get district councils. I ran for the position, and then my community elected me. So it's not so much that it's like all big politics and you got to be a big shot. Sometimes you actually got to do the groundwork, and that groundwork can be tedious, and sometimes you have to wear multiple hats, as I do. So that, as far as messaging, the messaging gets lost when all you watch is Fox News. The messaging gets lost when all you watch is one select media source, or you're watching YouTube and your favorite influencer is far, far left or far, far right, because you're not going to get the whole the grounding of the crisis or the solutions. What I hear a lot of people talk about is the issues, and a lot of what they call solutions aren't solutions to the problem. It's a real quick fix. There's no quick fix to anything, but they act like, sending the police here is going to help. In the civil rights era, when we needed the help from the National Guard, that's because the cops wouldn't stop beating us. Now we need the cops to help from the government officers from beating us. You see what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah,
over policing a situation has never worked.
Let me know if this is a proper analogy. It almost sounds like you're saying the strategy has been to put a Band-Aid on a wound that in reality needs stitches.
Of course, man. Like I said, a criminal, a person who kills somebody or whatever, everyone wants them to go to jail. So when you hear about somebody talking about defund the police, we're not talking about we don't want people to go to jail for crimes. We're talking about we don't want cops getting paid to come out here, harass and beat people of opposite race or from whatever they is, or the same race, or whatever the issue is. And that's their job. They're getting paid to do that every day. They're not solving crimes. They're not getting murders. That's what we mean by defund them. If there's money being allocated to the police even, and that money's not being used adequately, and we talked about that a little bit yesterday, such as like the shot spotter. In hindsight, shot spotter is a great idea if it works. If it works. How many people have been a victim of police brutality or misidentified or wrongly accused of a crime because the cops pulled up because of shot spotter, versus like how many people actually been arrested, how many lives was saved, how many stories have you ever heard? Man, if it wasn't for shot spotter, man, we don't know what would have happened to save the person.
So Councilman Dacres,
oh, we found a dead kid over here. Maybe if shot spotter was here, maybe we could have saved his
Councilman
life.
Dacres,
Maybe if shot spotter was here,
I got to give a little pushback. And for anybody who knows me, or who's just familiar with Mogul Minds in general, I'm not some random cop bootlicker or anything like that, but I'm also not some person who irrationally hates cops. Now, that being said, I have talked to, in the barbershop and things like that, actual CPD officers, actual guys who are on the streets in some of these tough neighborhoods dealing with the community. And one of the things that I did hear was, okay, so ShotSpotter can effectively tell you where them shots came from. Like, we just saw a story last week with, I think, an 11-year-old boy who was killed overnight, and he was killed overnight, and they didn't find his body for like 8 hours or something like that. And people were saying if ShotSpotter was still active, that at the very least they would have been they would have known that it happened a lot sooner. Now, from my understanding, in talking with some CPD officers, because I ask the tough questions just like I will ask of you, Councilman Dacres, I will ask those tough questions to law enforcement. And I do ask about these things. And one thing that they say is, look, at the end of the day, police can only operate with cooperation from community, right? Unless they catch somebody doing it or they have hard evidence, even if they know to a degree, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And without help from the community, there's not really a ton that they can actually do. If everybody know this dude over here, this dude probably got bodies. Nobody wants to tell on this guy because this guy has bodies. So when he does something and ShotSpotter is in his vicinity and we know he was in the area this night and we know he's been beefing with these guys over here and now one of these guys is dead, but nobody wants to say anything and nobody saw anything, this is how a lot of the problems continue. That seems like it could be a valid argument to me. You're still muted, Councilman Dacres. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
You can hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Am I good?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. If cooperation looked like just telling on people, then I would agree with you. But I will argue that we've brought down violence on the north side, specifically in Chicago, specifically more uptown in Rogers Park, because of cooperating with the gangs, not trying to say, hey, you're the problem because you're in a gang, or not relying on police to say, hey, this is the gangbanger. We heard information on him. Let's try to arrest him as soon as possible. Because you get that kind of element in that way, you just leave room for the next person to become that person. What we do in the providing preventative measures is pretty much trying to see what these issues are, if we can mend them, if there's something we could do about it, if there's a funeral, can we help with the services, if it's a territory issues, can we work out a perimeter where we got some safe spaces so grandma could get to school, to work, so the kids can get to school. Like, those effective ways of having safe spaces to be able to talk about what the solution looks like is what I see as cooperation. When your cooperation is, we just need to lock everybody up and over police everybody, you're going to end up in a police state where they don't need an excuse to randomly shoot somebody. They don't need an excuse to throw a grandma across the street, because I look at them as people. So staying to the topic of migrants, when you see the police breaking the law, the military or whoever, who's going to stand up for you? You see, it's easy to say, well, they're not Americans, they're migrants. But when it was black people, we wanted help from the whole world. It's like, because it's not black people, that nobody sees the injustice in it. Now, I'm not saying that we got to save everybody. We're not going to be able to save everybody. And there's a 0% chance of, like you said, getting everybody out. But when it comes to like criminality, if being black, if being Latino is a crime, if being here, whether you got papers or your work permit or not, is still a crime, then there is no right way. The system is broken, and we shouldn't be punished as Chicagoans because the right couldn't get it together. There is no border here in Illinois. We just said if you come here, you would be treated like a person. And I don't think that's such a bad thing. I think people lose track of the ideology that migrates. They end up in play and what's supposed to happen when they get there. there. Like all of the right way thing, that's I believe that comes from like racism. I believe that comes from like misunderstanding how the immigration system and
I
process
think I
works.
think it's more I think it's more the second thing that you said. I think it's more misunderstanding and not actually knowing how um, convoluted a lot of governmental processes are. But to this point, right, when we're talking about the allocation of resources and some of the topics, I'm just going to move along a little bit because I realize in us having this conversation that there's a lot more that we're not even going to be able to get to today. So we probably will have to have more conversations. And I do want to give a few people a chance to join in when they can. But for example, I'm just give you one anecdote. And this is how this looks to a lot of Chicago. This has happened through a lot of areas across the city. And we talked about this briefly yesterday. Now, my mom lives in South Shore. In South Shore, the neighborhood high school is South Shore High School. So in different areas in the city, there were vocational high schools where they used to teach you, like you could come out of high school with hard life skills. You could have a plumbing certificate. You could have like you could learn electrician. You could learn a trade and things like that. So South Shore High School was a high school that was basically 4 high schools in one. They had entrepreneurship, leadership. I can't even remember the other 2 right now. But one of the schools got a new campus a few years ago. So the old campus was still there. Like they built it like on the same block. Like it's just they're on opposite ends of the football field. The old campus, like you said, you guys work in violence prevention measures, right? So you have to create things for the community. So guys who do similar work to you in the South Shore area had petitioned the city to allocate funds so that they could build out one of the South Shore campuses, one of the ones that was no longer being used, to get some of these kids off the street after school, to give them programs where they could actually have something to do other than gangbang and sell drugs after school. And then when the migrant crisis began and they started to ship in people by the thousands, they made that shelter for migrants. And this is already an underserved community. This is already a community that a lot of the people are living below the poverty line. This is already a community where it's not going to be the easiest for a lot of Spanish speaking migrants to assimilate. I, in my head, thought it would make more sense to assimilate a lot of these people into into neighborhoods or adjacent to neighborhoods that would be easier to assimilate, easier for you to get resources and speak to people. When there's no language barrier, it's easier for you to assimilate into the society. To me, in this specific scenario I brought up in South Shore, it seems like you ripped a little bit away from an already impoverished community and gave it to people who effectively, and I understand the perspective of nobody's illegal on stolen land. I understand the perspective of crossing the border is the initial crime. And this administration is looking at it as whether you overstayed your visa or whether you cross the border illegally, that is the crime. So now you're taking things away from American citizens and taxpayers who worked just to get resources allocated to their neighborhood, and then effectively you're giving it to migrants, and then we see all these other resources going to them. I think that some of this is, and I understand having a heart and treating migrants as people and everybody having human rights. But at the same time, we cannot invalidate the concerns of American taxpayers.
Now, at that bridge, like you said, American taxpayers, how many times have you your whole life walked down a street and like a street you probably took your whole life, you come up and then that street's going in the different direction? You know what I'm saying? Like you're like, man, or this was a 2-way street, but now it's a 1-way street and it's cut off going the other way. Like how many times
They
have you
have
seen
to
something?
fix things because it created micro problems over time that grew into bigger problems.
Yeah, but how many meetings have you went to about the curb?
Never.
You see what I'm saying? So we tend to walk up on issues and complain about something that there was probably a public forum about. Like, man, what are we going to do with this land? What are we going to do with this space? Let's have a vote. And if people say they vote don't count, but if you're not there to make your vote it's 100% sure not going to get counted. Now, you can walk up to a situation and complain about the outcome, but they don't just wake up with blueprints. They don't just wake up with building plans. And it's a reason that those buildings was failing academically in the first place. People don't pay attention to the small details, whether it's microaggressions or micro racisms or financial economic issues, or whether it's a drug epidemic or whatever it is in your community. We don't focus on the problem when it starts. We look at what happens because of that problem. Oh man, kids are getting low grades. Oh man, this housing crisis, man. The property value is going down. We look at all these issues that came from a problem, and then we say, man, how are we going to fix the issue? And still don't touch the problem. There's still local meetings with aldermanic parties where people and they're voting on issues in the community. Should we put the garden right here, or should we put the resource center? When those people you said when the people come outside the community and it's being gentrified, they don't miss a meeting. They don't miss none of my meetings. Sometimes my constituents, they come to every single meeting. I see the same faces every time. So when it comes down to a lot of those issues, it's like, man, I would love to hear somebody that voted against something and it didn't happen the way they voted, or they voted for it and they didn't get what they voted for. Because we're talking about people that voted for Trump and Trump not living up to what he said he was going to do. And on the issue of spending money on migrants, just because we're spending the money on blowing up Russia or stealing from Burkina Faso, or if it's the Ukraine that we're spending, that's still spending money on migrants. So he lied.
I think it's mismanagement of funds. I wouldn't call it the same, like spending money on migrants the same, but I understand that I'm an isolationist.
I'll say in the America First argument, that's not spending money on Americans. That's what
Agreed.
I would argue.
I agree with that 100%.
It's spending money on foreign people that's not directly here, and a lot more money than the migrants who are neighbors to us got. That's all I'm saying.
And I'm gonna bring Kiwan in here after this last little piece. I agree with you for about the way that we allocate funds externally. I personally am an isolationist, right? So I believe that America needs to take probably like a 10-year break from damn near all foreign aid possible. Unless the entire country is going to collapse and go to war and there's going to be a bunch of people dead, then we need to stop sending funds everywhere and fix what we have going on here. I don't think that that's going to happen, and I understand that that's not taking everybody into consideration.
Yeah, my fault. I didn't want to cut your wisdom. You said something else about proximity. If they're going to go where the space is available. A lot of these communities you're talking about, they're up and coming communities, and the Hispanic community is doing well in Chicago. So to just bring all these Venezuelans, or just because they're migrant, because there was other people that came other than Venezuela, and just drop them off in Latinx communities, that would be improper too. He would have got like crazy pushback if he'd have did that too. That being said, Broadway Armory, a spot that they ended up using for migrant space.
Right there near the Lawrence and Broadway.
Yeah, we were concerned that they would shut down all access to the community because of this. No, I hold my district council meetings there. It's still youth playing basketball there. It's still it's still things happening in the community. So like I said, it's about like how, we talking about community, man. So people need to understand that there are policies. Like I said, locally, I'd argue that a lot of issues people should deal with their alderman, their state rep in that area, the senator for their area before they directly go to the mayor. And there is issues with like the mayor and certain policies. I do believe when like Johnson got elected, he spoke a lot about like reparations. When he got in office, this migrant crisis kicked off. And as a Black Chicagoan, I would have wanted to hear a little bit more about reparations. It was like, man, you giving everybody else money. I wouldn't even cared about the debt. If I would have been like, you're going to do what you said and give these people the piece of the pie who objectively been getting the lesser benefactor of Chicago on the west and south side more specifically, then I would say that, he was doing his job. But I'm not going to say he's not doing his job because we were hit with a crisis and he had to do something about it. That's just not fair in terms of practice. And like we should just be a little bit more fair and a little bit more about policy. I was a part of a coalition that put together Bring Chicago Home. Anybody can look it up and kind of Google the intricate details of it. The ideology of Bring Chicago Home is rich people pay less taxes than poor people. Pretty much the skinny of it. The idea of Bring Chicago Home is if you're buying property less than $1 million, we already pay this tax, people. We already pay the tax. That you were going to get a lower rate because it was not fair that poor people were paying the same amount as rich people for these properties. And the rich people were still going to have to pay their amount. I don't know if it was going to be raised slightly or something like that. But all of that money was going to go to Chicago housing. You know, it was going to go towards ending homelessness. That was the idea of Bring Chicago Home. The impoverished communities voted against that, bro. You know, it was low, it was on the ballot. People did, you know, they heard taxes, they got scared. And like you said, I understand you know, being misinformed, being ill-informed, because that same methodology is how Johnson got in office. The North Side voted for him first, and then everybody dropped Lightfoot, Jamal. They didn't vote for none of them. They was like, all right, let's try Johnson. He didn't come with reparations. They're like, man, we're not going with nothing nobody else said. We're going the opposite direction. Let's just go right. That's me personally, that's not the move that I will make, because everything glitter ain't gold. I think Trump, especially in the issues with Kamala, said a lot of stuff that maybe I agree with. Definitely said way more I didn't agree with. But overall, in terms of on Chicago issues, this guy has no idea what we're dealing with here. You know, there's people making comments about like spending money on migrants that don't vote. You say your vote don't count, but you don't make it. You know, so I would love to see what policies people fought against and lost or won, to hold that to the test of time for community. Because the more active people are in communities, the better their community is going to be. You can't come to the town hall meeting mad about local issues that you didn't do anything locally to change.
I think that that's a good place for me to, and I did post in the comments. I don't, and I know Councilman Dacres, you only got so much time, so I'm gonna try to wrap us up here in the next like 13 to 15 minutes here. Now, Key, specifically to the topic about Chicago dealing with the migrant crisis, how ICE has been operating. I don't know specifically what you've seen. One last thing that I will say about it, and Key, you can go ahead and unmute, and you can go after this. The one thing that I will say is, in my post, maybe I didn't elaborate as well as I could have, but I said that it seems to be a very racialized thing in the way that this is all being handled, where because local government isn't necessarily working with the federal government to identify the problematic so-called illegal migrants, it is damn near made it where they're on some Gestapo shit where you could just stop any Hispanic person with a too strong of an accent and be like, show me your papers. And I don't fuck with any type of police state activity where you could just, I'm an American citizen. Unless you have reasonable, articulable suspicion, you shouldn't be asking me for a motherfucking thing. I don't, or at the very least, I'm not obligated to give it to you. But people who are not citizens, I don't know whether or not they have those rights. I just know that I live in a community where there are a lot of European migrants, and I haven't seen any ICE agents doing anything, talking to anybody in all the months that this is going on. And maybe, just maybe, they all came over the right way, but I don't imagine that none of them overstayed their visas or anything like that. And obviously I have no evidence of this. It just kind of seems like Hispanic migrants are the easiest targets, so let's start with them. I don't know what that's about. Maybe I just don't have all the information. You've given me a lot of insight, Councilman Dacres, but I do want to get Key, do you have any questions for Councilman Dacres or on this topic at all, or anything that we've spoken about?
Oh man, I had so many. I just didn't want to interrupt. I was just letting y'all go. But first and foremost, much respect and peace be upon you, Councilman Dacres, for the work you're doing out here. We definitely it's definitely a necessity. And as far as us running and putting ourselves into the action, civic engagement. But man, I see a lot. Actually, one of my little cousins got snatched up by ICE on some suspicion, and she speak perfect English. I guess she just looked a certain way, and they detained her for a few after they had to confirm. But they had a high population over there in that area of the illegal migrants, quote unquote. And I'm what I'm seeing, and I'm not, and like I said, I'm just be as candid as I can. I'm seeing what I've been seeing since I could remember. Police doing raids, snatching people away from their family. Now we wasn't getting deported, but going to Cook County Jail that's as foreign as you can be when you're talking about imprisoning people and detaining people and snatching them away without due process, never having a chance to explain. Now, I do also understand that how this system work. They because I've seen them people out there, and I do understand how they operate off a little propaganda. How they operate off weaponizing information and video footage. Now video footage is one of the most destructive weapons out, because you can make the footage say whatever the hell you want it to say. So, and one of the manipulation tactics that they've put together is making us believe that the majority believe a certain thing, and then they just shove it down your throat to kind of get us emotionally invested. So all I see is just same consistent behavior, obviously some corruption, and obviously because that's Illinois' history, that's the Fed's history when they want. And I see a lot of, and I see the same problem that the government capitalizing off of, and I don't think it's a race thing. I don't think it's a target. I think it's who's ignorant, right? Who is governed by laws that they're ignorant to, okay? Immigrants are governed by laws that they're ignorant to, obviously, because they couldn't find better ways to protect themselves from getting deported and snatched up. Same with us. We have not found ways to protect ourselves legally for the shit that we doing out here in the streets in Chicago. We have no means of protecting ourselves legally, is what I see. So I see ignorant people being taken advantage of in general. And I think the main reason for that is, one, our lack of civic engagement. And on one aspect of that is absolutely voting, right? And voting in troves, like you want to be voting in mass. But that's even less effective than running ourselves and grooming our own politicians who bring and learn how the language. Because I think even if you're into politics and your language is deficient and your knowledge and expertise as far as how to express yourself is not up to par, they're gonna shred us. They're gonna kick our ass every time we jump in the arena. Politics is like gladiator school for intellectuals. Politics is like gladiator school for intellectuals. So this is where a lot of the intellectuals go, whether they got law degrees, and they go flex their intellectual prowess, and by convincing people to believe this or that. Social engineering, we all know the process, and even more effective, I believe, than running. The biggest form of civic engagement is learning when to challenge for constitutionality, because ICE is a private entity. They're no different. It's a law enforcement agency, but it's a private entity. Everybody can be pursued in law. You see, the president is being pursued. They showing us that we can get things done.
So hold on, Kiwan, and I just want to get an understanding, because you saying that, and then earlier Councilman Dacres said sometimes law enforcement is operating illegally. Are you guys saying to some degree some of the activities that ICE is taking part in the city are not maybe necessarily lawful? If so, you guys would kind of have to point that out. Otherwise, it's kind of just going to be.
They tear gas CPD. The judge told them they can't.
I did see a video of that.
They're not even supposed to be tear gassing civilians or migrants, but they tear gas the cops, man. You think that's policy? You think that's legal? Come on, if you tear gas a CPD officer, they would label you a domestic terrorist.
I didn't know what the full story was, so I didn't know if the cops was interfering in their job.
If we just looking at it, do it look like they breaking the law?
See, but that's the thing, though, right?
I just want to help us make the distinction right now.
Right. Hold on. So key to that question: does it look like they're breaking the law? I think that this is where a lot of people have a fundamental misunderstanding. And again, I know we're not going to go for too much longer, definitely less than 10 minutes. But does it look like they're breaking the law is a loaded question, because just because something looks wrong, for example, slavery. looked wrong.
Murder.
But it was
But it was
lawful.
legal.
It was
But slavery was legal.
It was legal
Exactly.
lawful
One of them is
activity.
legal. This is where I said it's so the best thing about America is legal standards. It's legal standards. So first off, examine the conduct. All right. And then examine the law that's governing the conduct. All right. If they're inconsistent, you can challenge it. All right. Now, people, we all operating because we, like I said, our intellectual development has been stymied. It's been stymied. And this is where America separated from the world. This is why we ain't got as much war on this soil, because there is the element of utilizing the system to win and playing chess, not checkers. Right. It's a platform, and we just have not adapted to how to use the courts, how to use our government, because we're so used to being used and put to work. So my thing,
I agree. Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to cut you off, but just for clarity, and just for my opinion's sake, because I don't want to lose it. You coming with a lot of sauce, you know what I'm saying? But I believe that when we did practice the law to the highest potential, we were simultaneously and systematically assassinated, bro. Like, Absolutely. You have to understand how serious that is, because it's not like they made another group and, out debated us. It's not like we're a construction company and they got a construction company and their construction company was better. They burned ours down. They killed the lead architect. So it's not that we just can't understand or we don't want to get it. It's historically, all of our leaders were wiped out. All of them. All the people that invented whatever, all the people that came. So the problem is, like I said earlier, kind of go back to what I was saying, we've kind of, our way through the system has been, let's create a law that's so good for all of America that even black people can benefit. Civil rights has, it started from like segregation for black people, but now you got like a whole immigration act. There was reparation given to Asians because of what happened with COVID and all of this and that. And we still ain't got none. Like, it's like under the Civil Rights Act, they were able to get money because a disease came from their country. You know what I'm saying? Like, bro, you say
under the Civil Rights Act, so that means there was a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Okay, that right there. That's that element. And I do.
No, hold on. Wait. I just want to land the plane real quick, because we've sued America in the world courts. We have sued for reparations. We have sued. Those cases go nowhere. And I mean, it's because we're black, bro. The world, like, I don't want to like beat that horse, because this was not what this conversation was supposed to be about. But they are not, the whole black race is not sitting on the sideline just watching, as like we are just so uneducated and we do not know what to do. The thing is that like our solutions has come from a point of almost weakness, bro, because we gave up trying to like militantly have groups that can hold each other accountable, whether it was like considered a gang or a political move. We gave up moving like that. We gave up the black power thing, where it's like, no, as black people, we're going to all come together. Even if it's 15% of the population, we're going to all just be our little 15% and we'll work with everybody else. But that we gave up on that. Like, every time we started a movement and they start killing the leaders, we changed what the movement looked like. We've changed what.
Real quick for both of you, while I agree with the importance of the necessity of the conversation, I do want to steer us back to putting a bow on the Chicago and ICE thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you guys could give us, some of your final thoughts there, and then anything that maybe we didn't address on that. And I don't think this is going to be the last conversation. Just transparently, I renewed the StreamYard subscription, so we're good for at least a month. We could definitely have a couple more before I cancel this thing. But depending on the feedback that we get, maybe we keep going. I just want to make sure to stick to this particular topic, just because you and I. Everybody on this call, I've had individual, very long conversations with, and we all know that we'll continue to go.
I'll wrap up my last piece. If you got any like last questions, you can shoot me. I'd say that if the issue was what the media portrays as it deals with Chicago issues, we're talking about crime, murder, violence, right? As an American issue, right? Because they use these bogus statistics from all over the place where like, oh, it's only 15% of black people in America. Chicago, I'd argue we're more like 60% if you look at the demographics as like from biracial people to just by lone black people, by lone, black women. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I'd argue, with the indigenous, like we're more like closer to 60% in Chicago and not 15%. And then you're talking about poverty, which if you look to any federal analysis or any science of crime, poverty can be a big cause of crime, and then population, like density, like if it's a lot of poverty in a highly populated area, then there's going to be a lot more crime than if you're spaced out and affluent. So that being said, I look at overall numbers, because when we're talking about like black statistics in Chicago and needing a necessity for like the National Guard to come in, because let's be clear, that's not to help ICE. That's to like get all the gangbangers and the big crime. Trump throws that in and makes it seem like he wants them to help ICE, but really he's using that as a ploy to get these imaginary gangbangers that's, taking over Chicago. But if you look to the most violent crimes, 69% of those are white people. Mass shootings, 53%. In the whole America is white people. If you look at school shootings specifically, that's a little more closer to 80% a white demographic. Domestic violence as a whole, in terms of the whole America, 57% white people. And these are conviction rates. These people actually, once they go to court and we look at everybody who's in this jail system, 68%. If you lock a cop up for police brutality, this is a cop that's not doing his job. A cop that's just like, whatever the reason, he's beating somebody up. 68% of them are white. You see what I'm saying? So you're talking about like a
people
system.
are gonna make the argument, because I know obviously people are gonna make the argument, oh well, that's just because there's a lot more white people in America.
Yeah, maybe. But the ideology of when you look up violence, there's only one race of people, because you can these numbers. I got what the Southern
Poverty Law Center.
Yes, I got that. I got them. I looked up a few different statistics, so it's not coming from one place. But extremism, you know what I'm saying? There's over 1,100 extremist white groups, and 45% of them actually committed crimes this year.
And I just want to be clear that extremist white groups are on both ends of the political spectrum.
20% of them are on the left, 65 on the right. 82% of serial killers are white males. You see what I'm saying? So when you're talking about the issues and how we're going to deal with it in Chicago, let's not start with the CEOs, the judges, the senators, the House reps, police chiefs. Like, historically, the people who do horrible jobs of like violating people's rights and doing like hanging this system over people, is only one race. It's not like in this subject it's an Indian, in this subject it's black people, in this subject. When it comes down to crime as violence, and as violence is pertaining in America, this is a white man issue. So I refuse to allow people to justify the injustice of police violating people's rights, the military violating people's rights, in the ideology that crime is so bad that the only way to do it is to over police these people based off race and where they come from. I think that's sick. And we really need to look into the numbers. And if people really want to fix these problems, I would love to hear whoever is making analysis on white crime. And why is this happening? Why is 82% of serial killers that ever been convicted white men? More specifically, because when you break down the demographics, it's like, because white men make up like half the percentage of like the population of white people. So that number is like,
it's still disproportionate. Yeah, it's still disproportionate. Yeah. For anybody who has any opinions about this, please do not inbox me about it to have some sort of conversation. Comment below the post. If we get the engagement, I'm not going to read your essay that you send in my inbox. I promise you I'm not. If you have something to say in disagreement with anything Key said, anything Councilman Dacres said, comment below. I'm sure one of these guys will respond. And Key, I'm gonna let you put a button on yours in a second.
I ain't even saying
shit. No. I'm not doing that to you. I'm not doing that to you. But we And I do think that we probably will need to have further conversation. Maybe we'll do this again next weekend. I think there's a few different topics we didn't necessarily get to today. I think Chicago, there's a lot of conversation that we could bring in. Maybe at some point, one of your coworkers, Councilman Dacres, or somebody that you work with that works in a different facet of, maybe as a social worker in Chicago, or maybe somebody who works in the different elements of Chicago that sees this from a different perspective. You could invite in on one of our next calls. But Key, before we get out of here, was there anything about this whole Chicago ICE situation, how it's being handled? We got the No Kings protest going on right now downtown. That looks pretty insane. Anything that specifically regarding the Chicago ICE situation, how it's being handled? Do you think that these guys are over policing, maybe the way that Councilman Dacres said it, or just let us know your kind of wrap up thoughts on this topic and anything that you think maybe we could get into next week.
As soon as you're ready for me to get it.
I'm ready right now. Go for it.
Like I said, my thing is just pattern recognition. I just see a pattern and I see the same variables within that pattern. And that's just ignorant people being taken advantage of, people who uninformed, poor, impoverished, you know what I'm saying? All just being taken advantage of by law enforcement and these money grab political policies. And I know that there's a pessimism whenever someone mentions, "Oh, you could use the system." Well, like I said, I'm a big believer in case law, and I see these judgments get made, these orders get issued, and shit get restrained. You can restrain this conduct. There are remedies to help us protect ourselves legally. My big thing is legal protection. That's all I see. I see a group of people, something happening. Why is it happening? What's allowing it? There are laws that them people are acting off of. They're acting off executive orders, okay? That's deploying ICE. If we understood their delegation of authority, we can go and challenge that order and restrain that motherfucker and restrain their action the same way we can do it against the police with our own communities, the same way we can do it against judges in our own communities, the same way we can do it against politicians. This is true civic engagement, checking every aspect, every branch of the system and every element of the system. When we make a check, that's a balance. That means there's a due process owed. Now, I don't know if they owe that, if a private entity like ICE owes, who ain't constitutionally delegated, owes constitutional protection to immigrants who are not even American.
I had that question as well.
That's a really vague area. So those people have to distinguish themselves and rise to the occasion and start to advocate for their legal protection, what protections they are entitled to, and what protections a private entity like ICE affords. Now, on us, on the other hand, it's our government. They owe us. They owe us due process. That's what that social compact, the contract, is about. Our big issue is we fall victim to counterintelligence because we go grabbing at issues that can't be that's not governed by any clear legal standard. Now, so we're gonna grab at these issues that's not governed by legal standard, and now we're in a fucking twilight, and everybody's wondering why it's not going right or left, because it ain't no right or left. It's all below the threshold of legal consciousness. So raising the issue above and to legal standards gives us credibility and gives us standing to to enforce legal protection against tyrannical and despotic acts like we is seeing. And like I said, it's vague. On its face, it look crazy, but there are so many parts in between. That's the reason why that immigrant shit, and it got a lot to do with corruption.
Hey, Kiwan, and I do appreciate that. And you brought up a good point that I often do think about in the conversation I've even had with my wife. I don't know what everybody has human rights, but I don't know outside of human rights what rights illegal migrants have when they come here.
Particularly with a private entity like ICE, they're not delegated.
Hold on 1 second. We're coming up on the 90-minute mark, and to be completely honest, me and Councilman Dacres said we was gonna keep it to an hour, so we already 30 minutes past that. But I do think that with proper planning, we can do this a lot bigger, a lot better, by next week or maybe 2 weeks out, the way we used to do it back in the day a couple years ago. I appreciate everybody who came through and checked out. Anybody who has input, anybody who has thoughts, anything we didn't touch base on. You guys go back, Councilman Dacres, Key, go back, check it out. Leave comments about things that we forgot to touch base on so that I can have it in a list for us to go over the next time we do this. Maybe we do it at a more convenient time where more people can join. Right now, half the people are at the protest, another portion of people at work, and other people just doing regular Saturday stuff. But as we're getting ready to go into the fall and winter, more people are going to be in home. So if this is something we're going to be doing, maybe we could pick a better time that works for everybody and go a little bit more in depth. I appreciate you guys. I'm sorry I did have to cut both of you a little bit sooner because I know that there's stuff on my list that I didn't get to. But let's make it a point to do this again and share it with people who you think can have useful input. I think that the more people we get having this conversation, and next week I think I'll make it a point to have a couple of our Hispanic people or people from our Latin community. I don't like that term Latinx because it's goofy to me, especially if you've learned a little bit of Spanish. It's a genderized language in and of itself. So Latin, I've never heard a Hispanic person identify themselves as I'm Latinx or Latinx. I think that's just a funny way to say it. But I'll make sure to have people directly impacted by this, some people that it hits closer to home for on this call with us. And I already have somebody who, has done Mogul Minds in the past. I'm probably going to have to reach out to my friend Gabby. I know she speaks, she's very, she has a lot of opinions about this. And I'd like to see how the dialogue between her and you go, Councilman Dacres. But I appreciate you guys. I appreciate us, getting this time to build. And hopefully, starting these conversations can lead to bigger lasting impact or just a change in people's perspective in the way that they go about thinking about and discussing these topics. I appreciate you guys. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream now. Make sure to share it, like, comment, subscribe. Hopefully we're going to do more of this.
Peace, God.
What peace to the guys. What other platforms? I see it's on Facebook.
It's on Facebook and it's on YouTube. I'll talk to you about that at a different time, though.
Yeah,
we'll do.
Peace.
All right.